Okay, we are back. So Dewey had just been introducing the idea of common sense. And one of the meanings of common sense is kind of like wisdom or having good judgment, practical wisdom. I think he said sagacity or something like that. But here he's going to go on and give us another sense of common sense. So he goes on. There is, however, another dictionary definition: the general sense, feeling, judgment of mankind or a community. It is in this sense that we speak of the deliverances of common sense as if they were a body of settled truths. It applies not. It applies not to things in their significance, but to meanings accepted. Right, so not to things in their significance, not to the significance of existential things, but to meanings that we believe to be true, more like verbal meanings or symbolic meanings that we believe to be true. When the Scottish school of Reid and Stewart erected common sense into an ultimate authority and arbiter of philosophic questions, they were carrying this signification to its limit. Yeah, historical reference here to the Scottish school. I think also called the Scottish Enlightenment, based around this idea of common sense. The reference to practical sagacity in dealing with problems of response and adaptation in use and enjoyment has now gone into the background. So that was the earlier idea of common sense that he addressed, which I dealt with in the previous video. So practical sagacity, how to deal with practical real-world problems of using and enjoying the objects of existence. So he's saying this, in this meaning that we're currently talking about as meanings accepted, this signification of practical sagacity goes into the background. Common now means general. So instead of talking about kind of the common world, the everyday world, the practical world, we're talking about things in general, what is generally accepted to be true. It designates the conceptions and beliefs that are currently accepted without question by a given group or by mankind in general. So this is one of the meanings of common sense, right? What does everyone believe? Or what are the beliefs of this particular social group? They are common in the sense of being widely, if not universally, accepted. They are sense, in the way in which we speak of the sense of a meeting, and in which we say things do or do not make sense. They have something of the same ultimacy and immediacy for a group that sensation and feeling have for an individual in his contact with surrounding objects. It's an interesting way to put it, that common sense, we use common sense to talk about that our kind of immediate beliefs, reactions to things. They're kind of immediately understood as correct, which is on par with the immediacy of sensation or feeling for the individual. You can't really talk maybe about the group feeling. Instead, you talk about group common sense. It is a commonplace that every cultural group possesses a set of meanings which are so deeply embedded in its customs, occupations, traditions, and ways of interpreting its physical environment and group life that they form the basic categories of the language system by which details are interpreted. Hence, they are regulative and quote-unquote normative of specific beliefs and judgments. Yeah, so every group, there's a set of meanings that every group has, like presuppositions, kind of its assumptions of what is correct and incorrect, good and bad, which form the basic categories for approaching the details of any given situation, right? It's kind of the assumptions we come with to deal with particular situations. So they're regulative. They regulate how we deal with new situations. They're normative. They give us a sense of what should be done, of what it is right to do. There is a genuine difference between the two meanings of common sense, but from the standpoint of a given group, there is a definite deposit of agreement. So there's definite difference between common sense as practical wisdom and common sense as pervasive beliefs of a group, but within a group there's definitely an overlap, right? There's some commonality. They are both of these meanings of common sense are connected with the conduct of life in relation to an existing environment. One of them in judging the significance of things and events with reference to what should be done, the other in the ideas that are used to direct and justify activities and judgments. So the first one of these is the idea of practical wisdom or sagacity, judging the significance of things and events, figuring out what should be done. Excuse me. And the second one about the ideas that guide our activities and judgments would be the kind of pervasive belief system of a group. Taboos are, first, customary ways of activities. To us, they are mistaken rather than sagacious ways of action. So taboos, something that you should not do, that is prohibited within a social group. But the system of meanings embodied in the language that carries tradition gives them authority in such highly practical matters as the eating of food and the behavior that is proper in the presence of chieftains and members of the family configuration, so that they control the relations of males and females and persons of various kinship degrees. So taboos, kind of like common sense in the way of like a pervasive belief about what should not be done, and they guide kind of what we think is good or bad behavior in particular situations. Especially dealing with authority figures or members of our families and really important relationships like that. So you can look at it in either sense of common sense, right? Either taboo as a kind of practical wisdom. It is wise to behave in this way, but also in the sense of a pervasive belief, irrespective of a given practical situation, right? We just don't do that. To us, such conceptions and beliefs are highly impractical. I think he means taboos here. To those who held them, they were matters of higher practical importance than were special modes of behavior in dealing with particular objects. So for certain social groups, taboos are the most practical thing imaginable, just about, right? For they set the standards for judging the latter and acting in reference to them, right? Taboos and other very deeply held beliefs set the standards for how we judge objects and how we act with reference to objects of kind of practical life. It is possible today, along with our knowledge of the enormous differences that characterize various cultures, to find some unified deposit of activities and of meanings in the common sense and feeling of mankind, especially in matters of basic social cohesion. So we can find some kind of universal common sense. Anthropologists have searched for these cultural universals. Anyway, we'll go on. In any case, the difference between the two meanings, again, practical wisdom or pervasive beliefs of a social group, The difference between the two meanings may be reduced without doing violence to the facts, to the difference between phases and aspects of special practical situations that are looked into, questioned, and examined with reference to what may or should be done at a particular time and place, and the rules and precepts that are taken for granted in reaching all conclusions and in all socially correct behavior. It's a really, too long. Make your sentence shorter, Dewey. Come on. It doesn't need to be this long. You're not saying anything that complicated. But he's saying that the difference between these two meanings may be reduced to various aspects of practical situations that we're, investigating, that we have to deal with, and figure out what should be done, right? That's one meaning of common sense. The other being the rules and precepts that we take for granted in figuring out what is socially correct, the socially correct thing to do. What is the right thing to do? Both are concerned, one directly, the other indirectly, with the ordinary affairs of life in the broad sense of life. So both of these meanings of common sense are about our ordinary life, which is going to be different than scientific inquiry, which we shall be coming back to presently. Yes, but continuing on with common sense for I think the rest of this section that I'll be looking at for now. So next paragraph. I do not suppose that a generalization of the inquiries and conclusions of this type under the caption of use and enjoyment needs much exposition for its support. So we've heard before about practical situations being those where, or practical inquiries being situations where the use and enjoyment of some bit of the world is in question. So, yeah, use and enjoyment, he says, are the ways in which human beings are directly connected with the world about them. Questions of food, shelter, protection, defense, etc. are questions of the use to be made of materials of the environment and of the attitudes to be taken practically towards members of the same group and to other groups taken as wholes. Right, so different areas where use and enjoyment come into play. Use, in turn, is for the sake of some consummation or enjoyment, right? Satisfying some need, some interest, or enjoying something. Some things that are far beyond the scope of direct use, like stars and dead ancestors, are objects of magical use and of enjoyment in rites and legends. So even things that are not, that we can't directly interact with, that we can't bodily interact with, there's a good sense in which they are objects of use and enjoyment as well. If we include the correlative negative ideas of disuse, or of abstinence from use, and toleration and suffering, problems of use and enjoyment may be safely said to exhaust the domain of common sense inquiry. So, common sense inquiry, how should something be used? How can we enjoyment, or how can we avoid using it? Is it something that just cannot be enjoyed? So, he's saying that pretty much covers all of common sense inquiry. I think the last paragraph here that I'll deal with today. There is direct connection between this fact and the concern of common sense with the qualitative. It is by discernment of qualities that the fitness and capacity of things and events for use is decided. So the qualities of things, the textures and timbres and colors and smells and tastes and all of that, the feels of things. So it's by discernment of qualities that the fitness and capacity of things and events for use is decided. That proper foodstuffs, for example, are told or discriminated from those that are unfit, poisonous, or tabooed. That enjoyment suffering is qualitative through and through, and is concerned with situations in their pervasive qualitative character is almost too obvious for mention. Right. Kind of a verbal tick of Dewey's. This is barely worth mentioning it, but I'll mention it anyway, or the reason why I've called your attention to these obvious facts is, we often says things like that. So anyway, but yeah, common sense inquiry is based on the qualitative, right? What is present to us, what qualities of things are present to us, and what does that tell us about how we can use something or not use something, how we can enjoy something or not enjoy something. Furthermore, the operations and responses that are engaged in use and enjoyment of situations are qualitatively marked off. Tanning skins is a process qualitatively different from that of weaving baskets or shaping clay into jars. The rites that are responsive to death are qualitatively different from those appropriate to birth and weddings. Inferiors, superiors, and equals are treated in modes of greeting and approach that are qualitatively unlike. So when we're dealing with the practical world, we're dealing with qualitatively defined activities, as opposed to, say, quantitatively defined activities. The difference between tanning skins and weaving baskets is not a matter of quantities, of how much of this or that, of how much time this or that. It's a matter of qualities, of qualitative properties of things, of what you're doing in response to the qualities of things as being of this or that type, of being a skin or being a reed that can be made into a basket. Right? In the practical world, those are qualitative differences. Of course, when we look at it scientifically, then we're going to be more concerned with quantitative differences. But that, I think, we will be coming up on that in the next section, where he finally gets around to talking about science, I think. Yes, just looking at the wrong page of my hard copy here. Yeah. So he'll actually talk more about common sense a bit in the next section, hopefully coming up on science as well. Anyway, that is all for now. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.